40,000 years ago, in a limestone cave in what's now South Africa, someone breathed in smoke on purpose. Not by accident, not because a fire got too close, on purpose. We know this because archaeologists found the cave, Border Cave, on the edge of the Lubombo Mountains, packed with the residue of burned plant material, layered into the soil like pages in a book nobody meant to write. Charred datura seeds, scorched wild tobacco relatives, and not in the fire pit, off to the side, set apart, used. Picture it for a second. No lighter, no rolling paper, no idea what a lung even was, biologically speaking, just a person crouched by a small fire, deliberately pulling in smoke from a plant that wasn't food, a plant that, as far as we can tell, did nothing for hunger and everything for the head. That's the detail that should stop you. Somewhere on this planet, tens of thousands of years before agriculture, before writing, before the wheel, a human being already understood that you could burn a plant and breathe the result and feel different afterward, and they kept doing it. This is not a story about cigarettes, not about cigars, not about the guy outside your office building, hunched against the wind, looking vaguely apologetic about the whole thing. This is older than that. Older than addiction as we usually think about it, older than commerce, older than the very idea of a bad habit. This is about something close to instinct. Here's the claim this episode is going to make, and it's a stranger one than it sounds. Smoking, inhaling burning plant matter for its mental effects, might be one of the oldest deliberate behaviors humans ever invented. Not eating, not tool-making exactly, a specific, repeated technological act. Take fire, take plant, combine them, breathe the result. Every culture you've ever heard of that burns something sacred, incense, sage, tobacco, opium, is downstream of this. The thread runs from a cave in South Africa to a temple in ancient Mesopotamia to a teenager behind a 7-Eleven, and it is, improbably, one continuous thread. So the question isn't really, when did humans start smoking? It's, why did we never stop? Let's go back further than the cave for a second, because the answer starts in the body, not the fire. Humans didn't invent the desire to alter consciousness. We inherited the hardware for it. Your brain is loaded with receptors that exist for entirely unrelated biological reasons, regulating mood, attention, pain, and it just so happens that certain burning plants produce compounds that fit those receptors like a key into a lock nobody asked to be picked. Nicotine, muscimol, THC. The plants weren't trying to get us high, we just happened to be standing there, evolutionarily speaking, with the right locks already installed. So when early humans started experimenting with fire, really controlling it, not just scavenging it, somewhere around 400,000 years ago, we're sitting on top of an accidental chemistry set. And it didn't take long to start poking at it. By the time we reach that border cave evidence, dated through radiocarbon and stratigraphic layering to roughly 40,000 years ago, we're not looking at a one-off. Archaeobotanist Lynn Wadley, who spent decades excavating southern African rock shelters, has pointed to bedding layers at sites like Sibudu Cave laced with insect-repelling, possibly psychoactive plant material, deliberately gathered, deliberately burned. Here's the wait, what? Some of those plants weren't just smoked, they were ash mixed with other substances to be chewed, in a method some researchers think predates inhalation entirely. The smoking we picture, burn it, breathe it, might actually be the second act, not the first. The first act may have been even weirder. Plant ash as a chemical amplifier, mixed straight into your mouth with something else to make that something else hit harder. Which, with some plants, is a distinction that kills you once before you figure it out. Move forward to around 12,000 years ago in the highlands of what's now Peru and Ecuador, and you find some of the earliest direct evidence of tobacco use, not grown yet, just gathered, wild, and burned in small fire pits that show no trace of cooking residue, no food, just smoke. These weren't kitchens, they were something else entirely. Fast forward to roughly 5,000 years ago, and tobacco stops being something humans stumble into and starts being something humans cultivate, actually farmed in Mesoamerica, bred over generations to be stronger, more potent, more reliable. By the time you reach the Maya, somewhere around 1000 BCE, smoking isn't a curiosity anymore. It's a technology, refined the way any technology gets refined, deliberately, repeatedly, for an audience. Maya ceramics show it plainly. Figures with rolled bundles of tobacco leaf held to their mouths, smoke curling upward in painted lines that archaeologists still debate the meaning of. Some scholars, including ethnobotanist Wade Davis, have argued this wasn't recreational in our sense at all. It was medicinal. It was ceremonial. Priests used tobacco to talk to the dead, or at least to convince everyone else they could. Here's where we have to be careful, though, because this is where the story stops being charming. Because somewhere in that ceremonial use, something shifts. Tobacco gets stronger than its wild ancestor, bred that way on purpose. The smoke gets more concentrated. The rituals that once happened a few times a year start happening more. And the line between sacred occasional act and thing your body now expects gets thinner with every generation of cultivation. This is the part that rarely comes up. Humans didn't just discover a plant that happened to be addictive. We selectively bred a wild plant into something far more potent than nature ever intended, thousands of years before we understood the word nicotine, let alone what it does to a receptor in your brain. We optimized a drug before we had the concept of drug addiction to warn us we were doing it. And then came contact, 1492 and the years after. European sailors carried tobacco back across an ocean, and what had been, for thousands of years, a plant tangled up in ceremony and medicine and the occasional doctor visit, became something else entirely within a single generation. A commodity, a cash crop, a reason to clear land, and not long after, a reason to enslave people to work that land. By the 1600s, tobacco wasn't sacred anymore. It was Virginia's entire economy. 40,000 years of ritual compressed into roughly a century of profit. Nobody can tell you the exact moment smoking started, and that's not a dodge, it's the honest answer. The evidence in that South African cave shows intent, but not the first match struck, not the first lungful drawn in. Somewhere before 40,000 years ago, in a moment no archaeologist will ever recover, a person figured this out alone, in the dark, by a fire that was supposed to be for something else. What we can tell you is the shape of everything that came after. A wild plant gathered by hand, a ritual built slowly, generation by generation, around fire and smoke, and the strange comfort of altering your own mind on purpose. A technology of breath refined by the Maya, sanctified by priests, painted onto pottery that still exists in museum cases today. And then, in the blink of historical time, a sacrament turned into a commodity turned into an economy, and an economy built, quite literally, on human bodies in fields that were never meant to be theirs. Border cave to Sibudu, Sibudu to the Andes to the Maya to Jamestown, Jamestown to a vending machine. The line never breaks, it just changes hands. So picture that person again, The one crouched by the fire 40,000 years ago, breathing in something on purpose for the very first time, with no idea what a lung was, no idea what addiction meant, no idea that anyone would ever do this again after them. They weren't trying to start anything. They were just curious what would happen. Everyone who's ever lit anything since has just been answering their question.